Bruno Mars on Magic. You know, every once in a while, I just have to go back to YouTube and watch that video. It is so retro cool. The way at the end there, they make the heart with a cassette tape. I love that. Mike Barrett with us. Good morning to you, Mike. How are you?
What's a cassette tape?
That's what people are saying.
Yeah.
I'll have to send you some links via email. We don't have time for it.
I don't know.
And during good policies, but it is a cool video. You got to check it out.
The SFW.
Okay, so we talk about the insurance industry. It's very complex out there. Within the past couple of weeks, Mike, we've talked about flooding. We've talked about ice and snow on the roofs and damage like that here.
Yeah.
In one of our recent conversations, I shared with you that I'm familiar with somebody who's experienced what they thought was flooding, which isn't, even though it was water going somewhere that it shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now we've had a fairly mild, or actually a perfectly timed out meltdown here.
So far, so good. Yeah.
So far, so good.
Absolutely.
But now, just because we haven't had floods from the rivers, brooks, and streams, it doesn't mean that people aren't being inundated by water. Where I'm going with this here is you look at the fields, you look at the driveways, water is running, and you mentioned this last week, getting in the basement. That's not a flood, is it?
No. By definition, definition of flood through the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, administered by FEMA, is that in order for it to be defined as a flood, which if it's not defined as a flood, there's no coverage in the flood policy. But to be defined as a flood, it has to impact, I think, 2 or more neighbors or 2 acres or more of land, give or take. I'm going off memory, but it's about that scope. So if you're simply getting water in your basement, while that's essentially, yes, a bit of a flooding situation, it's not going to be covered by a flood policy, especially if you don't have it. And it's going to be a specific exclusion on all homeowner policies because homeowner policies exclude flood, which is why you have to buy a separate flood policy, and groundwater seepage. So that's something that, if you have occur, could become problematic for you because obviously water touching organic materials, wood, drywall can be a mold cause. So.
Right. The black mold, the nasty old stuff that lingers around. So if I remember correctly, you've mentioned, too, that in order for it to qualify as a flood, correct me if I'm wrong, it has to be in a designated floodplain?
No.
You mentioned something along those lines. That's why I asked.
Yeah. So it does not have to be in a designated floodplain because flood can happen anywhere. It's an inundation of water. I mean, you think about all the mountains and all the hills that still have plenty of snow up there.
Oh, yeah, they do.
And, over time, as development continues, as houses are being built, they're doing the groundwork and the site work. Well, what's happening when they're doing that? Or they're putting a new driveway in. They're essentially diverting water. And that could change how things are if you're at the bottom of that hill. So it's not, I could buy flood insurance where I'm at, and I am not in a flood zone. If there was ever a flood at my house, there would be a lot of people in trouble.
More than the 2 needed to qualify as a flood.
It would be about 1 million acres, but that it's the season. I grew up in a house in St. Johnsbury. Every year, water was an issue. And my dad, early on, he actually, took out and dug into the foundation, the floor of the basement, and dug down a little bit and made a sump pump area. And water diverted, and it was properly wicked away, and that's a good thing. Now we're starting to get to where groundwater seepage could be covered. So if you have gone through the process of getting the water sump pumped, and the sump pump fails, and now you have water damage as a result, you could have coverage. And why do I say could? Because through an endorsement, which is an additional piece of coverage that's not automatic on a policy, you can buy an endorsement that would give you a backup of sewers and drains, which that type of a loss would qualify. And the limit typically starts at $5,000, but you can work your way up. So if you have a finished basement, you could have $10,000, $25,000, $50,000. There's one company in particular that we represent, Safeco. They have an endorsement that says, look, we'll pay up to the limit of coverage in the house for groundwater seepage. So if it's a failure of the backup of sewers and drains. Now, in addition to the sump pump, if you have a drain system around your house, there's people that have had, again, site work done, and maybe that daylight drain that is where the water would come out away from the house somehow got plugged. Maybe somebody was mowing a lawn and grass catchings got in there and clogged it up. Now you have water in your basement. That, again, if you have backup of sewers and drains, could be covered. Otherwise, call Fish and Game, get some fish, have some fun.
Have your own trout pond in the basement.
Stock it. There was a house I was renting a number of years ago where that was literally my quandary. I'm like, should I continue trying to wet shop this thing or shop vac this thing with the sump pump going at the same time and just watching it stay static? Because as much as I was doing, the water level wasn't going down. Or should I just call Fish and Game and have them stop?
Well, let's go back here. You said a lot of the coverage for water seepage and groundwater backup starts around $5,000. Let's liken this to automobile coverage, all right? $5,000 may seem like enough, but how many people do you know with a basement have just their washer and dryer down there or just their furnace, right?
Right.
So $5,000 isn't going to cover all this stuff if it gets that bad.
Right.
Same thing with car insurance, okay? Yeah. Having the state minimums isn't going to, keep you covered for a full loss of a new vehicle.
Right. And depending on what you have down there, you might need to do a dry out. And dry out on its own could cost that. Not even talking about recovering the furnace or recovering the washer and dryer. Hopefully, if you know that you have a basement prone to getting damp, hopefully your personal property that's down there is all elevated.
Elevated, right.
Hopefully everything's elevated. It's amazing what 6 inches of elevation or a foot of elevation for anything in the basement can do if you have that possibility of water. And again, it goes back to mitigating a chance of loss as the insured. So something to think about as we could see some serious rains, and you may not see snow around your house, but there's snow in the hills.
Oh, there is.
It'll be there for a while.
Well, a lot retained in the ground now, too, still. So
yeah, the water table's high.
Yeah. So, in other words, as we always say, you have to have the conversation, ask the questions. Insurance is very complex. That's why not everybody does it.
Yeah. and we're always happy to talk to you about it. And I'm a big. This is what I always tell people: if you have something occur and you in your mind think, well, maybe that's not covered, call me anyway, and I'll go through it with you. And if I see a line that's gray, I'm submitting it to the company because I want the company to put their eyes on it, because as an adjuster, it'll be their job to see if there was a trigger of loss. So don't go at it alone if you don't have to. Always do your due diligence. Due diligence is my favorite word. Free. So do it.
Yes, it is. Or just in case. Have you met him?
He's a great guy.
Yeah. So if you have questions, call your insurance agent.
Yeah, give us a call. We're on Portland Street in St. Johnsbury, and you can give us a buzz at 748-5224. Visit our website, thebarrettagency.com, Google, Facebook, and YouTube, all Barrett Insurance Agency.
And we encourage folks out there, if you come up with a question about the complexities in insurance and you'd like us to touch on it, get in touch with you via email.
Absolutely. Mike at thebarrettagency.com.
All right.
Happy to hear from people.
Thanks a bunch, my friend.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Sounds good.
All right. So there's our good policies for the week. We are at 8:43, 37 degrees in Lindenville. Next on the playlist, Leona Lewis.